On this episode of Who Dat,
They deporting a 10-year-old boy.
what do you think the backlash is going to be, 10 years from now with these kids that are growing up with that same fear, who are going to be afraid to call the police, who are going to be afraid to ask for help?
It's hard to say that this is the country, right, that I grew up in right now, because this is not the America that I know and the America that I love that we are seeing right now with this president.
When you see a regime that is bringing in tanks to D.C. to do a military parade, that's not America.
Yeah.
That is the antithesis of what we stand for in this country. When you have a regime... Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Who Done podcast. My name is Damian Galvan, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Representative Gil Cisneros. How are we doing, Gil?
We're doing all right. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm not going to be, dishonest here. The news is kind of concerning me. A good deal. It's pretty scary what's going on right now.
Yeah, it has not been good out here in Los Angeles County. ICE has been on. Well, let's just say they've been going crazy, right? Rounding up people. I was reading a poll earlier today that, people that support this, right, think that he's going around and they're getting violent criminals, that those are the people they're rounding up, who they're shipping out, but it is, they're just grabbing anybody. And we're seeing that this week. People walking to lunch from work, being grabbed, asked to show documentation, where were they born, just kind of being confronted because, frankly, because they look a certain way, right? They're brown, they look Latino, and they're just going after them. And it's very unfortunate what we are seeing out here today, and the lack of due process. They're not grabbing people with warrants. They're not grabbing people who are committing crimes. They're just grabbing people, for the sake of grabbing them. And, they may be U.S. citizens, they may not be. They're not asking for their legal status. They're just picking them up, and that's it.
Yeah. You said something earlier during a Jolly Good Ginger interview. You were speaking with him earlier today. Mm-hmm. And, you advised your constituents, and this sunk my heart to my stomach. You advised your constituents to keep their head on a swivel.
Yeah.
And you're not over-exaggerating here. And that's just something that I guess I didn't expect, to see in my lifetime in the United States of America.
Well, what I mean by that, right, is just be aware of your surroundings. I heard from, one of the elected officials here yesterday, right, about how, people are afraid to go to the store now. They're not going to the supermarket. They're not going shopping. They're not doing anything. And for good reason, right? Because they don't know when they're going to be confronted. They don't know if people are going to pick them up or they're waiting. They're just going everywhere. They went to the day labor sites. They're going to they're going into places of business and just grabbing people. It is crazy what is going on right now, and it's just very unfortunate.
No, it reminds me of this quote from Anne Frank's novel, mm-hmm. or the autobiography, talking about how strange things are happening outside. People are being disappeared, and people are being picked up and taken off the streets. Yeah. Children are afraid of returning from school and not having their parents there anymore. And I've talked about it on the podcast. I think a reason that I would say that I'm particularly afraid is because I have had this experience before. As a kid, with immigration, custom enforcement, mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know what you think about the potential backlash in a couple years from now, right? So after the incident happened with me and my father, I've talked about this on the show, I was really scared of police for years, mm-hmm. years and years and years. I remember there was one time where we were driving in Texas, and my dad, got pulled over for speeding in a small little town there, and he had his green card at this point, and right. Everything was resolved, but I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid. I was afraid
mm-hmm.
of never seeing my father again. Do you think that, or what do you think the backlash is going to be, 10 years from now with these kids that are growing up with that same fear, who are going to be afraid to call the police, who are going to be afraid to ask for help? Or do you think that that's a potential at all?
No, it's definitely a potential, right? If this is what you grow up with and what you see, of course you're not going to be trusting. I mean, I didn't have a situation like you, but I remember when I was a teenager, being confronted by a cop and being threatened. That wasn't something that it didn't make me comfortable, right? And it kind of, anytime, I would say even after that, right, it would, being confronted by or talking to another officer is just like, you are always assuming the worst, because that's what you've seen.
Yeah.
So, it is just a horrible, and there is going to be backlash, right? And there are going to be people who didn't trust. And look, immigrant communities don't like to call the police anyway. They're when you look at the data, right? These communities are safe, right? They aren't committing crimes, and I know they like to. This administration likes to kind of pick one or two things that happened and kind of blow them up out of proportion, as to far as make it sound like this is like an every hour occurrence every day of the year, right? But it is not. These communities, these immigrant communities, commit less crimes than your regular American communities, and so they are safe, right? But they don't like to call law enforcement, for that one reason right there, right? That there's always that potential that they think that they could be picked up or taken away.
Yeah, no. And I think the most interesting fact from that is the information that came out, saying that immigrants and children of immigrants are less likely to commit crimes,
Mm-hmm.
is actually the consequence of a study that was funded by the Koch brothers in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were trying to prove that immigrants are more violent and they're more likely to be criminals. And what they actually ended up doing was the exact opposite.
Right.
And, it takes me to what the director of ICE, Todd Lyons, was saying yesterday. I don't know if you saw this video. Max,
Mm-hmm.
if we could play this. Before we get into it, for some context here, he's basically saying that this inflammatory rhetoric about a group of people is causing, this certain group to now be afraid. Their families are afraid. They're just trying to do their jobs, is what he says, and now they're afraid. And when I watched this video, I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. The irony of the director of ICE saying that rhetoric towards a group of people is now causing them to be afraid, at the same time that ICE agents are coming in and disrupting communities who are just trying to work, who are just
Right.
trying to go to school.
Right.
So let's watch this clip, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
My officers and agents walk into danger so other people can sleep safely at night, so kids can make it to school safely and play outside. So while it's easy to be an armchair quarterback and make up talking points that get activists riled up, the bottom line is my officers and agents are out there protecting the same people who are threatening their safety. Law enforcement's common sense. Politicians need to stop putting my people in danger. I'm not asking them to stop. I'm demanding that they stop. Here's what I have to say to Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and anyone else stirring up the outrage about what ICE does. These are real people with real families you're hurting with your ridiculous rhetoric and inflammatory comments. And it's time to remember that.
Yeah,
You want to talk about rhetoric, right? He is spreading falsehoods and rhetoric about what they are doing. They're not, this whole thing about they're going after these people like to keep the community safe, right? These are women and children. They are deporting a 10-year-old boy who my cousin's kids went to school with. What danger is he threatening to society and the community here, right? Where he was living or where he was going to school. 10 years old. And they want to talk to him talk about him like he's this violent criminal and how much danger his agents are into, right? They're going after people that are working, working their ass off, right? To kind of make a better life for themselves. And they're pulling them, rounding them up on their lunch break or after they get out of work. They're going into places of business. This isn't the Crips and the Bloods or, violent gangs that they're going after, right? They're just going after working people, just trying to make a better life for themselves. And they are inciting this violence and everything. They're trying to incite the people around there, and I think it's purposeful. I mean, honestly, they are doing this on purpose. They want a violent confrontation so that they can call. They're already calling in the National Guard. They want to be able to do more. Trump wants to be able to invoke the Insurrection Act. He wants to declare martial law. He wants to show, California that, we need to bow down to him, the supreme master that he likes to think he is. And so he is trying to instigate this in order to make that happen.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most about that video is he says, your rhetoric is hurting my people. How fucking rich is that?
Yeah.
How rich is it to say that your rhetoric is hurting my people? Your politicians' rhetoric is hurting my people? When Trump went down that golden escalator a couple years ago and he said they're murderers, they're rapists,
right.
That's rhetoric that's hurting people. When Trump comes and says that they're not paying their taxes, when we know that the vast majority of immigrants pay their taxes, that's rhetoric that's hurting people. When you're saying
they're paying
that
the
they're
taxes
violent.
and they get nothing in return.
No, exactly. And that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
They pay into the system for years and years and years, and at the end of the day, they don't get anything from Social Security.
Right.
They don't get anything from Medicaid or Medicare.
Yeah.
They are giving into the system, knowing that they're not going to get anything out, but just wanting that opportunity to better their lives and give their children more of a chance to succeed. That America has given people and families for generations.
Yeah.
It's devastating to see this happening today in these United States of America.
No, it is, and this is, it's hard to say that this is the country, right, that I grew up in right now, because this is not the America that I know and the America that I love that we are seeing right now with this president, and it is atrocious what he is doing, and so unhumane what he is trying to do, right. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because I 100% agree with you on this point, talking about how essentially these people are sending in the military. These people, Donald Trump and his goons are sending in the military,
Right.
To rile people up, to get them to engage in behavior that they can later use to justify their violent actions.
Right.
And you know what? To be completely honest, this has been the Republican strategy going back to 2016. We saw this with the Black Lives Matter protests too. We know that 96%, you can Google this, any listener that, listening to this episode, you can Google this. 96% of Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful. But anytime you would turn on the news and you would see a Republican coming out, they were talking about how they're rioting, how they're looting. Do you condemn the rioting? Do you condemn the looting? Well, of course, rioting and looting is bad, but that's not what's happening.
Right.
And the richness of, again, you have people, specifically with the Black Lives Matter protests, you have people that are coming out on the streets to protest police, and your genius idea is to send in more police. Obviously, that's going to agitate things, and I think it's the Republican strategy, like you said.
Well, he's already creating falsehoods, right? He I think on one of his posts, he said there was looting going on. That's why he's bringing in the troops. There's no looting going on here in California. There's no riots. They are instigating. They are trying to instigate a violent event so that they can go and justify coming in here. And I don't know what he wants to do. Right? I don't know what his end game is. I actually think he's just pissed off for whatever reason. Right? But immigration too. Right? Has become his go-to when everything else is going to crap, which it is right now. The economy is horrible. He's not getting these deals that he said he was going to get, right, with the tariffs. He said he was going to stop the war in Ukraine. That hasn't happened. So everything is going bad for him. So he focuses on his one thing that he thinks his base will rally around him about, and that is immigration. And so now he's going after immigrants. And it is just horrible what we are seeing right now. And he is using them as a political scapegoat in order to kind of distract everybody from all the other horrible things that are happening because of his bad decisions.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I heard the similar perspective, too, that he's using this to distract from the Epstein files, from his fallout with fallout with Elon Musk, the fact that the economy is going to shit.
Yeah.
I agree, but at this point, I don't even think that it's a distraction anymore, because this is a story that deserves to, like, this is the far worse than I think most of the things that have been run in the news about him
Well,
in the past couple
it's
days.
again, it's another thing, right? That they've done, right? They tried to use it as a distraction, and it's become a lot worse than I think they could have ever imagined, and it's only getting worse now. You know, they're just making a worse situation worse.
Yeah, yeah, and it's going to lead to, like you said, more chaos and more disruption in these situations.
Look, and this is dangerous, right? Because these National Guard troops, right? They're soldiers. They're the military. They are not trained to do like law enforcement acts. They don't do riot control. They don't do crowd control. They don't do, whatever it is they're going to have them do, right? They are there to train and to fight wars. And so if they feel the pressure, there may be somebody who just kind of pressures and just his reaction is to shoot, which I believe is what they want, right? Because then that kind of justifies, whatever into the means that he's trying to get to right now, right? Is to kind of put California under some strict, rule of thumb, from him that he can make us bow to his, to his mercy. But I honestly believe that is what he is trying to do right now.
Yeah, and obviously, we can say it a million times. They're hypocrites. They're hypocritical. I just love knowing that Donald Trump, while this is going on in Los Angeles, while he's saying that all of this chaos is being sowed, he's appearing at a UFC event. Again, imagine if Obama said it perfectly. Imagine if I was doing any of this, right? Imagine if Joe Biden, it takes me back to the 2020 campaign when Donald Trump was playing ads talking about this would be Joe Biden's America, rolling footage of Donald Trump's America.
Yeah.
You're showing protests of cars burning and people looting allegedly, and you're claiming that that's what's going to happen under Joe Biden. Buddy, that's what's happening under you. And it's the same situation here again. You're like, oh, it would be violent under Joe Biden. The violence is happening here.
It's hypocritical, right? So today I went down to the Adelanto ICE detention center, which is operated by one of the private prison companies, which is a travesty in itself right there, right? I don't think those things should exist. Privatizing prisons for profit is not something that we need to do as a country. But we went down to this ICE detention center today. And I'll tell you the hypocritical thing, right, is they had a Republican delegation go down to El Salvador to go see what was going on with all these individuals that they deported, right? Some of them U.S. citizens, some of them, that actually had legal, had the legal right to stay here in the United States that they removed and sent to El Salvador. But I couldn't even get into the ICE detention facility today, which is my right by law as a member of Congress to go into any ICE facility and be able to inspect it and look it over. And they would not even open the gate for me today, me and two other members of Congress. But that is the hypocrisy that we are living in right now, right? That they will go and send a delegation to go take photos of all these guys, in front of all these people who have been locked up in another country. But I can't even get in to see the humane conditions of a detention center here in the United States. It is just, there is no respect for law. And this is something, look, everybody should be concerned about this right now, right? The lack of due process that they're giving these people. I talked to a gentleman today looking for his nephew for 3 days. They don't have no idea where he is. The one thing that we all know, right? You're supposed to you get your Miranda rights read. They read you your rights. You get your phone call. You're able to contact with your lawyer, your family. You have a right to an attorney. These are all rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Attorneys can't get in. We couldn't get in as members of Congress. People don't know. They're not letting them contact their families to let them know where they are. There is no due process going on right now. And if you think that somehow, even you as a U.S. citizen, that they don't think they can do this to you as well, you are wrong. You are 100% wrong and mistaken. They're doing it to them. They will do it to you. And so that, for me, is the big scary thing about this, right? Is that they are refusing to follow the law, and to do what's right, the things that we know are supposed to be done when somebody gets arrested. They are not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, it takes me back to 1984. We were talking about this the other day with Chad. This is 1984 because not only are they disobeying the law, the interesting thing here, Representative, is they're disobeying the law under the pretense of law and order.
Yeah.
They're disobeying it, saying that they're attempting to maintain law and order, when the reality is that the law allows you to make sure that there is order inside of these detention facilities.
Yeah. And they're coming in here trying to say that one of the reasons that they're giving for the National Guard, right, is to come in here, like you said, right, to maintain law and order. Well, it's never asked. The mayor didn't ask for this, right? The governor didn't ask for it. There's no law. Law and order is here, is maintained, and the local law enforcement is doing the job of maintaining that right now. And so there is no need to bring the National Guard in here, right? But they are doing it again, right? Just they are trying to instigate an incident.
No, absolutely. And again, it goes back to this hypocrisy. I thought that Republicans were for states' rights. This is an issue that obviously should be dealt with by California.
Right.
Something that, again, this is where I love to see the creativity from Democrats now. Something I saw Governor Gavin Newsom come out and say is, you know what? Hey, if you're going to cut off our federal funding, this was in relation to the trans issue, not what's going on with immigration.
Right,
hey, if you're going to cut off our federal funding, we're not going to pay our federal taxes. And something that a lot of Americans don't know, a lot of, conservatives online love complaining about blue states. Yeah, well, you like complaining about them, but you refuse to acknowledge the fact that the states that pay the most in federal, they're the only states at a surplus are blue states.
We pay, we have the California has the fourth largest economy in the world. In the world.
Yep.
Right? We pay $100 billion into like taxes and everything that goes to the federal government that we don't get back. So, the government's, the federal government's making $100 billion off the state of California from the taxes and everything that we pay into. And then this threat of that the president made that he's going to cut off federal funding, and not like all federal funding, right? But what about the risk that, you got you got USC, UCLA, all the universities here that are doing tremendous medical research, through federal grants that they're getting. And all of a sudden you're going to cut off this, cancer research, our City of Hope, which is one of the best cancer hospitals and research cancer hospitals here in the country, in the world. You're going to cut off their funding because for whatever reason, you're a little pissy about some CIF high school sports competition. And so now you're going to stop that research that's needed to help patients and help treatment. It's just, it's just so idiotic. There's this movie, I know I like to talk about movies here, right? You need to watch this movie it's a comedy, and it's not actually that good, but the point is, it's called Idiocracy. And it's about where, I think it's Luke Wilson, he goes in this hyper chamber, right, where he kind of falls asleep and wakes up like years later. And the whole damn country's gone stupid. I mean, it's gone stupid. And, and he's like supposed to be, and he's like, I'm not even that smart, right? But he's like the smartest person now that wakes up. And I kind of feel like Trump is leading us down that way.
Yeah.
You're stopping investments in things that are needed and crucial investments, right, that are going on, and yet for what purpose? Just because you hold a grudge. So now we're going to be doing medical research and things like that are needed because you're just frankly pissed off.
But I thought we were going to make America healthy again.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. The most transparent administration in U.S. history is sending in masked soldiers to go terrorize people in a state that is supposed to have the rights to act on their own behalf, not have some fascist president come in and do it for them.
Right.
I want to go back to something that was happening. I think it was maybe last week with SBA director
Right.
Kelly Loeffler.
Right.
So Kelly Loeffler was the former senator for Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and she only got that position because she's a billionaire and was appointed to that
Right.
seat.
Right.
She's wholly incompetent, and the closest thing that we have to an AI generated person walking around. And if you want proof of that, you can watch the Raphael Warnock Kelly Loeffler debate where she stares into the camera for an hour, calling him a radical leftist liberal. But I think she showed her hand and showed the hand of the administration the other day when she was having those proceedings in the SBA hearing with you.
Yeah.
Where she was basically, I was thinking about it earlier today. She was saying what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
She was saying, oh, no, we need to go in and maintain order. She showed the administration's hand before the administration decided to do what it did.
Well, she's already, this was one of the big worries that I had, right? So she went into like 6 cities, I think like Seattle, Minneapolis, Detroit, and I'm not sure, and like 3 others, right? Where they moved the SBA offices out of there, out of these metropolitan areas, and were relocating them to other places, as they said, for the purpose of safety for these communities. And and the point I was going at it with her, it's actually some good stuff. Go to Rep. Gil Cisneros there, and you can kind of see the video there. But how does moving an office keep the community safe? And I'm like, and first of all, I said, you're not Homeland Security. And she started talking about ICE. And I'm like, I'm not asking you about ICE. I'm asking you about why are you moving SBA offices and resources out of these metropolitan areas that have hundreds of thousands of businesses that need your support. And she kept talking about safety. And I'm like, how does moving an office out of this area make the community safer? And tell me what SBA offices have been threatened or are under threat, right? Where your people are feeling this, oh my God, I can't go to work because of everything that's going on. It's just we're being threatened at the SBA every day. I mean, it's just so fucking ridiculous, right? And this is like part of this is why she's the SBA administrator, right? Because she is a Trump, we'll call it ass kisser, fully falls in line with his agenda and what it wants and whatever he says. If he asked her to go there and take a shit in the middle of the street, she would probably say okay and do it. But that's like, she's just going to go along with whatever it is he says and try and kind of do her part, which is at the SBA, it's like, okay, what can I do? And I'm like, well, we won't support businesses in sanctuary cities but I'm like, by doing that, you're not only hurting Democratic businesses, you're hurting Republican businesses too, by removing the resources out of these metropolitan areas. It's so fucking stupid, man. She is just a rock.
No, literally. So for some context here, SBA, just because we've been using the acronym, is Small Business Administration.
Right.
Kelly Loeffler's the director of that. I wanted to just ask you, kind of breaking the fourth wall here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How frustrating is it to talk with her? Because again, I mentioned the debate that she had with Raphael Warnock, and I was getting frustrated listening to it.
Yeah.
Like, she's a robot, right? Like, I don't think that she has like predetermined answers
Right.
that she just repeats over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's all like practiced and structured. She knows what she's going to say. No original thought. She doesn't even really act, right? She just kind of spills off whatever she's been told to say. And that's just kind of like what it was, right? It's, if you get asked this question, you're going to talk about this. And again, like, why are you talking about ICE? We're talking about small businesses. How are you going to support small businesses in these areas if you're removing resources and offices out of them? That's the question I'm asking you. I'm not asking you about, I did tell her like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were the SBA administrator, not Homeland Security, because she wants to kind of prove her point. Right. And that's like, that's why Trump likes her, right? Is because like, oh, she's working there. She's pushing my agenda. She's doing this. Right. And it's all about kind of pushing forth and doing right, by him.
Yeah. So, and not by the American people. And
right.
that is devastating because at the end of the day, the thing that, we often forget is that, these public servants that are covering up their face and going and terrorizing these communities are public servants. They
Oh
work
yeah,
for us.
yeah.
And Kelly
And,
Loeffler
and
works for us.
if you disagree, right? So there was like, I can't remember his name right now, but the person who got nominated to be the FEMA director. Trump has said he wants to get rid of FEMA, right? So that they nominated an individual to be the FEMA, or actually, was it FEMA? Well, I don't remember. Right? I can't remember, but this individual said, Trump wants to get rid of FEMA. This individual said, no, I think that's a bad idea. We need to keep FEMA. Boom, gone. Nomination pulled.
Yep. It was the same thing that happened. I think that this is what led to the Elon Musk Trump beef too, where the second that Elon Musk was out, the person that Elon Musk suggested should be the head of NASA, Trump also said, you know what? Right. I'm out of here. Get him out of here.
And that's the person who had bipartisan support in the Senate, right?
Yeah.
Bipartisan
Ridiculous.
support, and would have probably easily been confirmed, and just pulled it because he didn't like, for whatever reason, he didn't like that at Musk. Musk suggested him. He was in a beef with Musk, so he's gone.
Yeah, and I think a big part of what's going on right now is because I think Trump is upset with his breakup. I think it's understandable too. Sometimes you lose friends and your heart gets a little bit torn. And unfortunately, this guy just so happens to also have the code to launch, nukes. And he's emotional. I understand it. But it goes back to also what Kelly Loeffler was saying, where I think a certain part of it is also their strategy. I think Trump accelerated it a little bit. But right now we're talking about LA and we're talking about migrants. You've mentioned the fact that, this is eventually going to also extend to U.S. citizens, or it could. And if people don't acknowledge that, then, they're making a mistake. I think it's also going to go to other cities. And that's kind of what I was getting at with Kelly Loeffler. She named these big cities because these are the big cities that are number one on Trump's radar. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm going to target these cities because I know that if I get in here, I can rile these people up and I can get a reaction out of them because they're progressive cities. Mm-hmm. And it's all part of this strategy, again, to get his base to think that anyone that opposes what Trump is doing is violent, that they're radical, that they're out of touch, that they're not American. Yeah. When, like you said, this country, the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment says it clearly that what is going on right now is not constitutional. These searches and seizures of people, unconstitutional. I saw a video yesterday of a woman who she was with her attorney at one of these ICE detention centers, and her attorney steps out to use the restroom, and they pick her up and throw her into an elevator and move her out to a different room so that they can continue to question her without her attorney present. Yeah. That is a violation of the Bill of Rights. Yeah. You have the right to an attorney under the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, these people who love to talk about how much they love the Constitution, right, are just basically shitting all over it right now. George Mason, one of the founding fathers, right, actually refused to sign the Constitution because it didn't have a Bill of Rights. And he was one of the authors of the Virginia Constitution, and actually wrote the Virginia Bill of Rights that our Bill of Rights is based on. But this guy would be he's got to be turning in his grave right now, right?
He's a rotisserie chicken.
Yeah.
He's spinning right there.
Yeah. Exactly, right? Rotisserie chicken. But, as to these things, right? These were like oppressions that they saw that were being committed by the king, that they felt needed to be in place in order to protect the American people so that it didn't happen again. And right now, we are seeing those things being done.
That's precisely the irony of it, right?
Yeah.
Like the Third Amendment, no quartering soldiers.
Right.
That is because King George would send soldiers into people's houses, like we see Donald Trump doing right now. Yeah. And this takes me to kind of the next thing that I want to ask you. And we've had this conversation a couple times on the podcast, but I think that this is an important point to touch base. Is this the moment to call it authoritarian? Is this the point where, we've crossed that line, or are you still hesitant? Which is reasonable, because you're calculated.
I still want to believe, look, I think Donald Trump, believes in authoritarianism, if that is an ism. Obviously he admires, like Putin, he admires these dictators and has said, praised them in the past. I have no faith in Donald Trump, but I still want to believe in the American people, right? That, that at some point they are going to stand up for their rights and demand action. It may not come until, the next two elections here, the midterms with Congress in the 26th, and then the next presidential election in 28. But I still want to believe in the American people, and they're going to stand up for what's just and what's right. And I think, when people know what's going on and what they're hearing what's going on, they are, frustrated with it, right? And they don't like what they're seeing. I think there's been polls out there that said they don't like the lack of due process, and the people are just being rounded up and kind of thrown into jail and not, not having an attorney, not being able to see a judge, and just kind of being deported without anything, right? And the coercion that's going on too, that they are coercing people into voluntary deporting because, they're taking their children away. And if you don't sign this, you'll never see your kids again. And we kind of believe, just talking to some of the attorneys and stuff, that's what they think happened with that young 10-year-old in Texas, right? He was taken away from his father. It was actually here in California, but then they were shipped to Texas, and that he was taken away from his father. And, who knows what they told the father. You'll never see your son again. It's, just threat after threat after threat, right? And we're hearing stories, too. They've been told that, they're coercing people on the bus as they're riding without ever talking to an attorney. It's horrible what's going on. But, yeah. I think Donald Trump is horrible. He wants to be a dictator. He thinks... and I said this earlier on one of our earlier episodes, right? The thing that I kind of find most disturbing in his confrontation with the Maine governor was that when he told her, or she said, "We're going to follow the law," and he said, "I am the law."
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not the law, but
he's not.
He's got this thought that he is.
And
his executive orders do not supersede the written law that we have in place.
No, absolutely. And I would agree with that. I think that when you see an administration, a regime at this point, because it's not an administration, when you see a regime that is bringing in tanks to D.C. to do a military parade, that's not America.
Yeah.
That is the antithesis of what we stand for in this country. When you have a regime that is on the precipice of calling in the Navy on their own citizens, this is an authoritarian regime. But like
not the Navy, the Army, people. The National Guard, the Army.
Well, I heard Hegseth was considering.
No, he said the Marine Corps. He said he was going to call up the Marine Corps.
Correct.
And send them down here, but we haven't heard anything or any evidence of that yet, right? But again, right? They're playing. He's playing to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And that's what they do, right? That's how he still has a job right now, as shitty as he's been doing. He plays up to Donald Trump. He tells him what he wants to hear. He agrees with him. He's like, I'm gonna do this to kind of support your agenda. So we need to call in the Marine Corps because of this fictional disorder and looting that's going on down there in Southern California. And so that's, he says that to earn points with Donald Trump, right? But as far as we know, they haven't been called in. I had some members have kind of down there in San Diego have already kind of reached out to the generals and everything down there, the leaders down at Camp Pendleton, and they said they haven't got any orders to do that. But yet, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, no, I think to Pete Hegseth, to give him a little bit, of leeway here, he's probably drunk off his ass right now. So he probably does think that there is rioting and looting going on in Los Angeles. And that takes me to something else that you were saying a little bit earlier, which is the popularity of these mass deportations. One thing that really is concerning me is the conservative rhetoric on Twitter right now. I see this. There's this one account that I reference a couple times because they are the epitome of everything that is wrong with these algorithms and specifically with X, called End Wokeness Now. They tweeted yesterday a video of them going to one of these, of ICE, going to one of these job sites and you see the immigrant workers scattering. And the caption for the tweet is, "Before you ask, yes, I voted for this." And that's, again, it goes back to this other tweet from the representative where he said, Islam is not compatible with Western civilization. This far exceeds racism. This far exceeds bigotry. This is a deeper problem that I think that we have not seen manifest itself like this in this country in like 30, 40 years. So it's really concerning that, obviously the things that we see on the internet are, a hyper reality. It's not what every American thinks. But when you see these accounts that are getting 3 million views on these posts and they're getting 100,000 likes and they're getting, this many retweets, what it does concern me is that it does numb people, and it starts to get people in the mentality of, okay, wait, if this is what this guy voted for and this guy convinced me to vote for Trump, then it must also be what I voted for. And I want to give kudos to, again, Democrats right now who are attacking this rhetoric. I think Governor Newsom is doing an amazing job. And I think that, going to these ICE detention facilities and talking about how they're not letting you in and highlighting these atrocities and doing it on social media is so effective to reaching your constituents. It's really about just keeping people informed right now, because that's the best way that you can keep people safe.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? And the thing I want to put out too, right, was with the National Guard troops coming in. I think I said it earlier already, but they're not trained to do this mission, right? And it creates a dangerous situation. So people just need to be extra careful as to what they're doing, and just don't confront them, because you don't know how they're going to act. If they're going to act like they've been trained to act, it's gonna be bad. And that's no fault of their own, right? They're not trained to do what they're being asked to do. And so it's horrible. It is. No.
And Trump and, again, his cronies, they know that they're not trained to deal with these situations.
And again, right, like I told you, I read a poll earlier today, right? It was actually kind of taken before all this stuff going on in Los Angeles, but there's this false rhetoric out there, right, that they are pushing, and you see it, right? You hear it all the time from people, his Trump czar, that they are going after criminals and violent people, and that's not the case. That is not the case. And so, but that is the rhetoric, and that's what you're saying. Like, that's what people are hearing, right? That's what they're hearing on social media. That that's what Fox News is playing, right? That's what all the other conservative news sites are showing, right? That they're hearing him talk about how they're going after violent people, lawbreakers, criminals, and it's just not true. But that's what they're hearing, so that's what they believe. And again, what threat does a 10-year-old boy pose to this, to our country?
Yeah, or a 60-year-old abuela that has been here for the past 30, 40 years.
Exactly.
Who just never had the money. That's the other thing, too. One thing that really frustrates me, and again, I try to have patience, because a lot of our systems are complex, and there's nuances to them that a lot of people don't understand because they are complex. And one thing that frustrates me is when people talk about the immigration process and they're like, oh, well, if she's been here for 30 years, why didn't she ever go through the process? Because it's expensive. Yeah. Because it takes time. Because there's hurdles and loopholes. And then on top of that, because in the situation that we're seeing right now, you had, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but you had an individual go to a citizenship test, and ICE was there waiting for him.
I mean, they're picking up people at their meetings and stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Like, you're asking people to go through the legal process and do it the right way, and then they do it the right way, and what? It's like paying taxes. They complained about immigrants not paying taxes when we know that most immigrants do. Now you're using their tax records to track them down.
Right.
It leads me into my next thing here, which I want to ask you. Obviously, there's going to be repercussions and harm from this. We already know that a lot of people are losing faith in institutions. And I think that this is only going to accelerate that. And to be completely honest, I think this is part of Trump's plan, that if you lose faith in the institutions, then he can have them do whatever they want. Yeah. How do we move forward? because I don't want, we're talking about this world where okay, well, right now the United States is in a population crisis. Representative, to be completely honest, I don't want to have kids if I know that my child is going to face the potential of being arrested for the color of their skin,
Right.
or if they're going to go to school and I'm afraid that there's the potential that they might not come back from school because of ICE, or because one of their classmates is going through a mental health crisis and decided to pick up their parents' firearm and do something that now impacts so many other families. How do we work towards rebuilding the trust that we used to have in our institutions once more?
Time for a quick message from our sponsors.
This episode of Who Dem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our elected officials is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
God, I think like right now, even with Congress, right, and the leadership in Congress and the House of Representatives, it is hard to have an answer for that, right? Because I don't have faith in the leadership. And I'm talking about the Republican leadership, right? The speaker and all of that, right? In the direction that they want to lead the country. I don't have faith in them to do that. But it is something that we need, that I work on and I want to focus on, right? That, have, at least with my constituents, to have faith in me and that I'm going to stand up for you and fight for what's right. And do what needs to be done. And I think that's what we need as individuals need to kind of do as well, right? I can only control what I can control. And so right now I can control me. And so I'm going to stand up what I think is right. I go to church every Sunday and I ask for the strength to speak for those that don't have a voice, to stand up for justice. And I'm going to keep doing that, right? Because I think it's the right thing to do and to ensure that people are treated humanely, regardless of their status. It needs to be done. And that's what I can control, and that's what I'm going to keep doing.
Yeah, I think that honestly, that's the perfect answer right there. And you're doing that, going out to these communities and, even outside of this, I love seeing the fact that you were going to small businesses before. And I think that it's important because, to be quite honest, most Americans don't really know what the day-to-day job of a representative is. And, obviously today we're seeing that your number one job is to, at least from my perspective, is to advocate for those people that, may not have their voices heard, and to speak out and speak up for them.
No, definitely advocating, I think, is a big part of the job, right? And whether it's I'm talking to individual citizens, constituents, or just, businesses, other local elected officials, just telling them, I am your voice, I am your advocate. Let me know how we can work together and I can make sure that we put forth, the message. And sometimes it's just, whether it's doing it there in Washington or maybe it's talking to a state official or doing other things, right? I want to be that advocate for them. And that is a big part of the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I think surprised a lot of people online is, I would assume to some extent the job of a representative is to know what they're voting on.
Yeah.
And we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene come out and say that she didn't know that the AI regulation was in the bill, and had she have known, she wouldn't have voted for it after having voted for it.
Yeah.
Is it the job of a representative to know what they're voting for?
Of course it is. Of course it is. That bill was they were throwing shit in there like at the last minute and everything, right? They were taking stuff out, putting stuff in. I just knew it was horrible and that I wasn't going to vote for it. So I think there was definitely some stuff in there that nobody knew, but that's a big one, right? The fact that the AI thing and that she didn't know that was in there was right, and that's been a big thing here in California too, right? Because of California, and I think that's really probably again another California reaction. California was putting things in place to protections against AI, in order to prevent companies or whatever the developers of this to make sure that there were certain protections put in place as they're developing this new technology. And the administration reacted, in this bill. That was a reaction to, I think, what was going on here in California. Again, I'm going to reference another movie, Star Wars, Rogue One. Princess Leia was already deceased, and they made her younger, right? And she was in the movie there at the end using AI, able to generate an image of her and her voice to do that. Don Rickles in Toy Story 4 was the voice of what? I think of what? The little pig toy? He had already died, when they made Toy Story 4. But they used AI to kind of take pieces and to recreate his voice, for that movie. And look, there's a lot of, people are really kind of worried about those things. I know Hollywood is really worried about that, right? That you can just kind of create actors or create images of actors to act out these scenes without even actually really needing real actors. Using Chat GPT to kind of write a screenplay or something without having to hire a writer in order to do that. But it is kind of scary with all these things. So I think there needs to be protections in place. But again, I think that was another reactionary thing, anti-California reaction, why that was put in place.
Yeah. And I think that it also highlights why unions are so important, because that was one of the big things that SAG-AFTRA was advocating for. I remember when they were on strike, was the fact that a lot of these people are now being, there's multiple dimensions to it, like you were highlighting. Obviously, there's the actor perspective, which is the fact that like people that are deceased are now being put into movies, and you don't have to pay anyone. You don't have to pay any royalties for that. You can basically get a famous person and you can put them in the movie, and you get to reap all the benefits. And you don't have to, pay anything. And then there's the writer level of it, which is the fact that they would bring on these writers for 2 weeks before, a movie came out, have them work on a script, and then they would have an AI come in and revise it and do the different, do different things to the script once they were gone. So I think that's one of the ways that I think Americans, going back to having faith in the people, unionizing is going to be one of those things that I think ultimately is a way that we show that we're standing up against Trump.
Yeah, look, there needs to be, you want to talk about RFK Jr. again, right? And about his, you heard about his thing, what they did, his report that he put out last week, and it had fake citations from that were AI generated. Shouldn't that be one of the protections that we kind of put in place, right?
Oh my God! And this is again. I said this on the other episode too with Chad, where I do the Let's Talk About Yesterday series.
Yeah.
There's so much things happening in the news cycles that like 10 years ago, that would have been like number one. We would have talked about that for a week. That's ridiculous. Like how insane that, you're using fake citations as the director of, our health institutions here in the United States. But now it just gets it not even swept under the rug. No one's hiding the fact. They can just say it out, but no one pays attention to it because Donald Trump is over here doing some other authoritarian bullshit.
Right. There's just so much. There's just so much going on that it's like that just kind of gets overlooked.
Yeah, going back on this, with not only just with the different pieces of legislation, but like with the news. How does a representative stay informed? Because there are so many things going on. Do you have staffers, or do you have briefs, or do you have a channel that you like to go to?
I don't get a lot of time to sit down in my office and actually kind of do things. Usually when I'm in my office, I'm taking a meeting with constituents or, businesses in our district or other organizations that are advocating for certain things. Like last week, I got to spend some time with Gabby Giffords. She kind of came by and talked about Giffords' efforts around gun violence, and measures that they're trying to get in place. I met with what is it, the Association of Realtors kind of came by here from the district, kind of advocating on bills that they want that'll make hopefully housing more affordable. So these are the things that we're kind of doing, right? Taking these different meetings and stuff, and so I don't really get a lot of time to watch TV, but if I do have a little time, I do usually kind of throw it on CNN. I kind of think of still seeing CNN as kind of maybe the more kind of moderate kind of news channel out there, right? It's, you're not getting too far into the left, too far into the right. But I'll kind of do that. That's mainly kind of what I'll watch or what I'm doing, and then I just kind of check the local news feeds. I have a subscription to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, San Gabriel Valley Tribune, which is our local newspaper out here. And I'm always checking those for like stories and news and things that are going on. I get the Apple News feed, because I have an iPhone, so I get the Apple News and their kind of feeds that are coming on, the different things. So that's mainly how I kind of get it. And then I got, other members that kind of are always highlighting things. I don't really have I know who is it? Is it Jake Sherman? Yeah, Jake Sherman, I think, is one that a lot of members or people on the Hill like kind of tend to follow. So you always got people kind of sending you those things as he kind of updates things and things that are different going on. You got other members that are kind of sharing tweets and different things kind of that are going on. So there's no lack of news or no lack of what's going on. Your staff kind of sends you stuff too as well.
Yeah.
So you're just always constantly being fed these different things about what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know, and I could imagine now with social media and with having a phone on you, it's really hard to like disconnect.
Yeah.
But I just had this image of like the old-fashioned representatives, with the newspapers in their office reading what's going on. But it makes 100% sense that now it's content creators and these different notifications, I'm assuming, that you get from Apple News or from the New York Times, that is actually what's keeping you informed.
Yeah, no, that's it, right? And I mean, your day is actually very busy. So, I mean, like last week I had 3 committee hearings, besides some meetings, caucus meetings, different other, groups that you're in, have meetings, getting ready for the Congressional baseball game. So we've had baseball practice, every morning. We did a scrimmage on Monday. Tuesday we came in this week. So there was a scrimmage Tuesday night, and then we had practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So there's just a lot kind of going on there that you're trying to kind of squeeze into a minimal amount of hours.
Yeah, I can imagine it. It often feels that 24 hours is not enough to get all the things done.
I mean,
how are you feeling about the Congressional?
Sometimes I just need to tell my staff, I just need 10 minutes so I can go to the bathroom.
I can imagine. Even then, your phone is probably still going off.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about the Congressional baseball game? What's the scouting report looking like?
I don't want to tip our cap, but I think we'll be ready, and I think we're looking pretty good. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I was looking at it the other day, and it looks like Democrats have been on a losing streak for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
You think it's about time that ends?
I think pitching is very important, right? We got I think we got 4 guys who may get some time on the mound, but you got to throw strikes. You can't walk people. You got to make the routine play. So I think it really does. This game really does come down to pitching, right? So we'll see. They made some rule changes, so we'll see. There's actually going to be no stealing, which was a big part of the game that people would, like it's a bunch of old men and I don't want to say old women, but it's older individuals that are out there playing on this field in this game, right? So there's not too many catchers that I think could throw anybody out if they're stealing, right? So stealing was a big part of the game. Like somebody get on base and they're just taking off, stealing. But actually this year there's going to be no stealing to kind of hopefully speed up the game because they put us on a 10 o'clock curfew. So if we have to finish by 10 o'clock and if we don't, then game's over.
And you guys are playing it at a national stadium this time?
Yeah, Nash Park. It's cool. It'll be the second time I've ever got to play on a major league field. You get beautiful hops. beautiful ground balls because the field's like in great shape. They're immaculate, so you don't really get any bad hops. So it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Have you ever thrown out a first pitch at a professional game?
No, I did
Not
it
yet.
one time at a when I was in Congress before. I threw it out at a Cal State Fullerton game. But yeah, I never got to do it at a professional game.
I will be on the radar for that. I don't know who you have to reach out to, but I would love to see you throw out a first pitch at a Dodgers game.
Well, yeah, you should come to the game. I think you can still get tickets, but
Yeah, we were looking into it. I definitely would like to come. I think it's going to be cool. It's always nice to see representatives go out and just have a good time because I feel like, especially in moments like this where everything is so tense, which kind of leads me into this question: has there ever been like obviously sports are competitive and tensions can get high. Has there ever been kind of, a little bit of shit talking out there on the field?
well, I'm sure there's like all part of that, right? Kind of goes on, and it's friendly banter in a sense there, but yeah, I don't think it's ever gotten vicious or anything like that. At least this is only my second time playing in the game, and I don't remember that kind of really going on in the first place.
All right, perfect. Yeah,
I don't think
I won't.
anybody's going to be charging the mound or anything like that if they get hit.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. And who do you think is right now your MVP? Are you the MVP for the team?
Oh,
Who do you
God,
think is
no.
gonna come out on top? Or
No, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to, we got to play the game, right? It's if everything was, if you could just do it on paper, then there'd be no need to play the game. But you got to play the game and see who kind of shines, and then we'll make that call afterwards.
yeah, well, I'm excited to look at that game. Hopefully, get to be there in person. I think it's gonna be a great time.
You can, if
And
you can't make it, C-SPAN I think shows the game.
that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, where people would be able to watch it
I think they can
if
watch
they're
it on
not.
C-SPAN, and they do actually have commentators. And actually, if you go to C-SPAN, you can go back and watch. I think they do have some of the old games there. You can actually online that you can go and check out.
Are you watching any film? You looking
You
at
know
any
what?
other
I probably
representatives?
should. Actually, that's a good idea. I probably should go and check out their pictures to kind of see what we're looking at. But I probably should go do that.
Yeah, that definitely would be a good idea. That's a funny thing to imagine. Just like extremely prepping for this congressional baseball game, watching film, having all the tape sent to you. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be cool, and I think it's a cool tradition that honestly we do. And I think that it hasn't been highlighted enough in years past. Obviously there was the tragedy that happened a few years ago with the shooting there. But apart from that, I feel like it doesn't really get that much attention.
Yeah, it is a good event, and it is for charity. It is something that I enjoyed playing in before. I actually consider it one of the highlights of being in Congress. And it's fun, right? It's kind of a chance to go relive your youth a little bit and get out there and act like a kid again out there on the baseball field, and just have some fun.
Yeah, yep. Well, what are your plans for the rest of the week, Representative? Are you busy for the rest of the day today?
Ooh, we got well, for the week I would tell you the big thing is we got the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth coming in to testify. Which is kind of ironic in a sense, right? These are technically like budget hearings, but we still don't have a budget from this administration. But I guess at some point you just need to kind of sit down and have the hearing and talk about these things. But it's kind of hard to talk about what your plan is for the military when you don't have a budget to kind of explain it, right? So. We'll see, but I pretty much doubt he's going to get too many budget. He would get too many budget questions from us anyway. Mind, it's probably going to be more about his kind of lack of ability and signal gates and other kind of stupid things that he's done. But that'll be fun. And then we got also, I think, a posture hearing on the Navy as well. So the Secretary of the Navy will be in, CNO will be in, and then from there we'll. Actually, I don't know what's going on. Tomorrow on the plane, I usually go over my plan for the week, right? So even on the plane, I will say I usually, because you got to get up early to make the early flight to get to LAX. So usually I'll kind of knock out for like an hour if I can, maybe an hour and a half, and then I kind of open up my binder and just kind of go through the week, different hearings, different meetings, and kind of get prepared for that. So
Yeah, awesome.
even on the plane, I'm working.
All the time, all the time. Barely get a 10-minute bathroom break here, and so I can imagine that the plane is a time to get some work done.
Yeah.
I would love. I don't know how this would look. This is just me thinking from the content creator perspective. But man, if anyone asks Pete Hegseth to rip a breathalyzer, I would love to see the entertainment there, because I wouldn't be surprised if it was a little bit high coming into that hearing. He might be stressed out, need to relieve some of that stress before he goes in.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I know you're busy, Representative, obviously, with everything that's going on. First and foremost, stay safe, because obviously, you're going out there to meet with constituents and to keep them safe. But at the end of the day, got to put on your oxygen mask first, is what they say. So make sure that you're out there staying safe so that you can represent those that, don't have a voice for themselves. And thank you for taking the time, right now to have this conversation. I know the audience is going to appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
As always, appreciate the time.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye.